Gio, you just kicked her castle away. She was just giving you dark stares.
You're looking at me.
No, I'm just trying to think. All right, so I am Jeff Pulver. I think I am anyway. And people who really want to get to know me, they really should visit jeffpulver.com. And really, there's a blog post I wrote a little while ago called Pieces of Me, which I basically talk about me from the inside out, because it sort of goes over my entire philosophy on life and sort of how I approach things. In a very similar way, actually, from what I understand, the way that you're building this film. I'm someone who believes in making good mistakes and following dreams and actually making those dreams come true. And good mistakes are something which should encourage, because with those good mistakes are discoveries which life really blossoms from. And
I'm sorry.
Oh, what's it?
I'm just looking.
All right, Carrie.
He's eating the couch.
Goodbye.
I'm sorry, it was so great what you were saying. I had to debate, but you really don't want that. It picks it up perfectly.
Oh, that's great.
It picks up the laugh.
Carrie, go.
Yes. Oh.
Carrie.
You guys can't hear it, but I'm hearing the dog. Goodbye, Carrie.
She was looking at the couch, and she was, yeah.
Yeah, nice little wet spot there now.
Yes.
Little dog lick spot.
All right, so I'll re-answer the question. But guys, I need to be quiet on the set. During the day, you can normally catch me on both Facebook and Twitter, because I sort of live in this virtual world of this social media living room that I built for myself, which sort of blends together the combination of online existence and a virtual existence, which for some people is the same, but for me, you throw in some real world friends and you start to experience life at an edge which most people haven't really been there yet. I grew up on the ham radio. As a kid, I had two lives. Some people these days on the internet have a social identity which represents them either by name or by nickname or something, and then they may have a different lifestyle, a different existence. But for me, growing up, as I grew up, I really had two identities early on. I had one where I was just me, Jeff, this more or less invisible person at school. And then I had a radio which sort of was my gateway to the world, which I sort of would turn on when I got home from school or on weekends or whenever I wanted to, and I would have connections with people all over the world. And with the radio, it was always public conversations, and anyone could listen, but it always felt a little private, and I could talk to people about almost anything. And over time, I ended up with friends, pretty much all over the world, but I used to have to be very much aware of what time of day it was, because that was a function of where I could talk to. Sometimes I could be talking to the Far East, sometimes I talk to the Pacific, other times it's to Europe, and other times just in the United States. But I would have a really good feel for one-to-one, many conversations. And from that, I sort of took on the role of Radar O'Reilly during a holiday season, because I used to be one of the people that would connect the radio to the telephone for military personnel overseas to talk to loved ones. And so I used to do that a lot. And but I sort of just had a strong passion to communicate, even though I may have done other things. And there was really just there were two of me. I was the person I was in my bedroom on the radio, and then I had, whether I was in junior high school or high school, I just got by. When I went to college, I was the kind of person that thought that technology would be a great way to meet women. So the summer before I went to university, I rigged up my Trans Am with a radio, and connected a telephone and a radio at my parents' house. And within a 30-mile radius, I was able to make phone calls, which in 1980 was pretty cool, I thought. But I go on campus and I actually show some women what I had in my car, and they laughed at me like hysterically, and it really crushed me. And it was like a very humiliating technology experience. And I realized that maybe tech and women really didn't get along. I wasn't so sure. In 1995, I had rediscovered my ham radio hobby, but at that time it was in the form of a software called Internet Phone. There was a company based in Israel that had released some software that allowed anyone in the world who had a computer and a microphone to talk to other people. And what was really cool was the day the software came out, which was I think February 12th, 1995, about 20% of the people who were online were using the ham radio call signs as their aliases. So even though we were not on our radios, we pretended to be. And I was talking to people as if we were on the radio. And I set up a mailing list, and I set up a whole bunch of other websites and stuff. And anyway, a few months into this, someone asked, is it possible to interconnect a telephone and a computer? And I said, sure. And I actually dusted off this phone patch I had, and it worked. And 3 days later, somebody from Jakarta, Indonesia, contacted me and told me he had some software that if you connected it to a certain type of modem, would do the same thing. And sure enough, it worked. And so about a month later, I worked on a project called Free World Dial-Up, which I launched, which I basically helped people from around the world. I encouraged people from around the world to talk to each other for free on the internet. And hundreds of people actually started to do that. And there were these hub cities from all over the place popping up. This is 1995. And the world's press was all over me. Because we were just a few people having fun. It wasn't like we were in a business. So the Sunday Times came out in November 95, right around Thanksgiving weekend. And the front page was about Bill Gates and the road ahead. And literally the back page was about me and Free World Dial-Up and how we were going to be a big threat to BT. Where I was laughing my ass off. And the only other people that were laughing, I think, were my friends. Everyone else was taking us too seriously. And this started a whole movement on the internet. And it was fun. And you start to understand that you can evoke change in the world by simply taking an idea and sharing it. And it gets popular. And a few months after that, a bunch of lobbyists in Washington, D.C. got together, heard about this internet telephony thing, and thought that it should be stopped. So they filed a petition at the FCC asking for the sale and use of internet telephony software to be banned in America, and the makers of the software to be regulated as phone companies. And I was laughing my ass off again. And this time nobody was laughing, but actually people were kind of scared because these lobbyists got together and with these phone companies and trying to stop this technology. And over a period of 3 days, I got several hundred emails from people asking what I was going to do about it. And I was saying, me? At the time, I had a day job on Wall Street. I was working in systems for Cantor Fitzgerald Securities. And I had no clue what to do. I had a ham radio license. I got that from the FCC. And I figured, okay, well, what do? I had no standing in Washington. 10 days later, the Voice on the Net Coalition was born. I simply reached out to the people I knew on my mailing list, created this coalition. Figured if you have 300 companies against this technology, you want to create a fictitious coalition. But anyway, ended up becoming a not-for-profit, a 501c6. And for 9 years, we successfully kept voice over IP unregulated in America and unregulated in many places around the world. And because basically, I just created this coalition, and we fought off the lobbyists. And later in '96, I got fired from my day job, and it turned out that voice over IP saved my life. Because I had the kind of job in systems that many other people had who worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on 9/11. And if I wouldn't have gotten fired, I sort of wouldn't be here today. And I learned that being lucky is okay. And what was funny for me was when I was at Cantor, for the whole year of '96, everyone was paranoid about losing their jobs, and we would sit around over coffee and talk about who's getting fired and what's going to happen. But even though we knew people were getting fired, did we leave? No. We all basically stayed around and waited to get fired. And it turns out that, people these days get fired, they're depressed, they don't know what's going to happen. In some cases, getting fired saves your life. Other times, it actually gives you a chance to go through a personal reboot and actually give you a chance to figure out what it is you want to do. Where's your passion? What is it you want to do now? And then it forces you sort of to figure those things out. So when I got fired, I was living on the edge. And the best thing my parents ever did for me when I got fired from that job was nothing. I don't know if I would be able to do that, but my parents, I had a software company for 7 years before I worked on Wall Street. And the summer of '96 was a really tough one because I had two young kids. They were twin sons who were 2. I had an overhead from a mortgage and from a whole bunch of other things and a burn rate. And I had no idea what I was going to do. So I ended up in September deciding to do a conference about voice over IP. Internet telephony is what we called it back then. And we figured 50 people would show up. About 200 people ended up showing up in New York City and Soho. And 6 months later, I changed the name of the event. I did the next one in San Francisco. And this ultimately became the trade show and conference and the birthplace of the commercial voice over IP industry, which helped change the way people communicate around the world and was responsible for a lot of tech innovation and a lot of tech opportunities, which have gone a long way. And during the journey, and I ran that conference myself for about 12 years. And between then and now, I had an idea for a company which ultimately became Vonage. You may have heard of Vonage. And I've started probably around 50 or so companies, most of them failures, but I tried. You see, I think that I had the most potential when I was born, and I've been a failure ever since. But yeah, you have a chance to basically every once in a while get lucky or find yourself in a good spot. So as far as who I am, I'm somebody who believes in following your dreams. I believe that people should actually I don't believe that there's such a thing as a bad idea. I think that but some good mistakes sometimes happen, particularly when you're exploring the future. I don't think life is a linear experience. We start here, end up here. I think it's a series of opportunities, and you have to sometimes go through certain cycles to really appreciate where you're going to get to. And sometimes you don't even appreciate where you got to because you forgot what you went through to be there.